In this video I'm going to look at the Vango Airhub Hex. This is an event shelter and not a tent as to what I would normally do. I like to try and bring some content that's a little bit varied. I'll show you the setup, and I'll also show you any particular difficulties or anything I find particularly easy about the setup, and then we'll have a look around the event shelter itself in a bit more detail. So just opening up the bag here, I always like to see a good big bag because it's just a lot easier to pack a tent. Some manufacturers will have very small tent bags, and there's nothing as bad, I think, at the end of the day if you can't get a tent back in a bag. So this bag here has certainly plenty of space, which is great. So obviously, just to begin with, just orientating a tent, so it is kind of like outer up and finding the top and the bottom. So the pegs that come with this are just a set of steel pegs. So it's not particularly windy today, but I'm just going to peg it out anyway, because you always can get a couple of gusts of wind, and the tent is going to occupy quite a large volume, so certainly could catch in the wind quite easily. So I'll give it a little bit of security with the tent pegs. So far, I mean, I've just set out the pegs, and the pegs all correspond to the actual Airbeams. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not a great fan of looking at instructions before pitching tents. I kind of think of enough experience, but I'll have a go here, and as far as I'd be aware, the next thing would be to start to inflate some of the sort of beams. But if at any point I think that there's something not quite right, I will then stop and refer to the instructions. But this is really just my experience of how I'm finding it, kind of straight out of the bag. So it looks like on each of the beams you have just one end that you have to actually inflate it from, and the air valve is then just protected underneath this cover. So here just on the pump there's a little pressure gauge, and it just very easily just twists on, and again a very easy connection with the pump hose, I suppose. And that's very obvious, a straight push in and twist, and looks to be fairly good seal. So really just on the pressure gauge here you can see it goes from 0 to 10 psi, and there's a little green area, so I would assume then that's somewhere between 6 and 8 is the right sort of pressure that you want on the Airbeams themselves. So some quick thoughts at this stage. I found it very easy to do, you know, really easy to set up. No real thinking about too much about what I was doing, so very impressed. And it sort of feels pretty rigid and strong and fairly well made. And again, most things are quite intuitive. You know, I've just rolled back the door. It's not rolled back perfectly, but it's just rolled back to sort of kind of let you see inside the tent a little bit. Door options, you have, you know, this here on this side, then you have another one where I'm pointing now, and a third one, so it's pretty flexible in that respect. And obviously height, I'm 6'1", and there's tons of height in this, and there's like a little storage area on the top here too, which is good. So the tent really is set up, and all I would have to do now is attach the ground sheet. Now this is really the only fault that I would criticise on this tent, and I would criticise it quite heavily, to be honest, and that is that this toggle is right underneath this Airbeam, and even at the moment it's quite hard to do that. So that's it in now, but even harder is it's almost impossible to get out from that position. So I've had to take peg out on the other side so I can bring the Airbeam in and then undo that. So that's a tent pretty much fully set up, or say tent and the event shelter. Immediately to some of the features that I like. I like the open doors, so your 3 open door options. I think I showed you earlier, you know, I like the sort of storage area in the roof. The guy lines are pretty good. You know, this little ring here allows the guy line to sort of be equalised, and there's no doubt that these Airbeams feel very, very, very solid. I like the mesh on the windows, which is pretty good, and they obviously can be sealed up as well. Let me take a second to do that. And from the outside, you know, the zippers there are covered and protected, you know, by nylon sort of flaps on them, so that's all pretty good. And it's a sort of a hexagonal structure, so it's really, really easy to set it up. And the roof, you know, you have tremendous height and room in here. So now it just comes down to my final thoughts. The key things that I like about this event shelter will simply be the ease and speed of pitching. I've never pitched it before. I didn't need to look at the instructions. I'm not saying that everyone should do that. I've got a lot of experience of pitching different types of tents. And certainly if I come across something that I think is not right, I'll immediately stop there and I will then look at the instructions. But it was only a matter of pegging a tent out, pumping up one of the Airbeams, and when you pump up one of the Airbeams, they all actually fill up, and then you have 3 valve choices on different sides of the tent, just to make it a little bit easier as well. Other features that I really like, I mean, I like the height of the tent and the interior volume. I also really like the mesh on the windows and also on the doors, so it makes it pretty flexible and really open for ventilation. The only negative thing that I will say is the ground sheet. That's just difficult to get linked up and attached. I just think that the little toggles could be a bit longer to just make it a little bit easier. But apart from that, you know, a great shelter, and as I said, key thing, really fast and easy to put up. I mean, no problem at all. So look, thank you very much for watching. Until the next time.